What happens when everything changes in an instant? Coming up on Unscripted Faith, Heather Rendulic survived 5 brain hemorrhages, brain surgery, and paralysis, and stared down a brutal reality. She had 2 options, give up or fight. And Rob Maine is in the house, lead pastor and founding elder of Renaissance Church in Pittsburgh, unpacking why strong theology matters most when life is anything but neat. Unfiltered, gritty, faith when there's no plan B. Let's go. Welcome to Unscripted Faith. I am so honored you chose to join me, and today's conversations are surely going to build your faith. Imagine you're 22 and suffer through 5 brain hemorrhages and brain surgery that leaves you paralyzed. Heather Rendulic says she was left with 2 options, and she is here to tell her story. Heather, welcome to Unscripted Faith.
Thank you so much, Angela. I'm so happy to be here.
I am so honored to have you and to hear your story. So girl, tell us.
Oh goodness. Well, it is a crazy story, but it ends in only the most perfect way that God can orchestrate. I was 22 years old, as you mentioned, and I had a random stroke. I was otherwise very healthy. It came out of the blue. After further testing was done, they diagnosed me with what's called a cavernous angioma, which essentially is a cluster of really weak blood vessels that they're currently, the only known cure is brain surgery to remove the lesion. However, mine was so deep in my brain, they considered it inoperable because I, again, was otherwise very healthy. I initially recovered very well from the first stroke. They told me to avoid blood thinners. Hopefully it won't bleed again. But my lesion ended up being very aggressive, and it bled 5 times in 11 months. So wow. I had 5 strokes in 11 months, and the 5th and final one completely paralyzed the left side of my body, almost killed me. And at that point, they said they had to do the brain surgery because this obviously was going to kill me if we didn't remove it.
So wait, Heather, so were you at school? Were you at home? Where were you when these strokes were happening?
I was at IUP. Okay. I was doing my undergrad studies. I was a junior at that point. But luckily my family lived about an hour away from campus. So when I was in and out of the hospital, we were in Pittsburgh at Presbyterian Hospital in Oakland.
Wow, so then with each one of these strokes, did you then go home? Obviously you were in the hospital and then you stayed home, or how did that work out for your junior year?
I did stay home as much as I could until I recovered. And so I missed a lot of classes, but fortunately my professors really stepped up and helped me. And you know, but obviously after the brain surgery, I had to take some longer time off.
Yes.
And because I couldn't walk. And
okay, so you have these 5 strokes and this hemorrhaging, and so you get the brain surgery. What then?
So then I was moved to an inpatient rehabilitation hospital in Pittsburgh called Mercy. Okay. And I was on the stroke unit. I was by far the youngest person there.
I can't imagine, 22.
And I started the process of trying to relearn how to walk and move my affected arm and hands. I spent about a month there and then got moved to home at my parents' house where I was in a wheelchair and doing outpatient rehabilitation.
Now, did you know the Lord during this time, or when had you got introduced to Christ?
Yeah, great question. So I was raised in a Christian home, and I knew the Lord my whole life, but I'll be honest, I did not have a personal relationship with him. And I was in college and I was doing college things. And, but when this started, that's the only thing I had to cling to was my faith. And one of my testimonies out of this whole ordeal was we were obviously praying, no more brain hemorrhages, no more strokes. Yes. And our whole church family was praying for me. We were all praying every day and believing that the Lord was going to come through, but my lesion kept bleeding, and I really got into a dark place because I was questioning my faith and why wasn't God listening to me? Why isn't he answering my prayers? Yes. And it wasn't until after my brain surgery that the neurosurgeon came in and talked to my family and said that actually because of those 5 bleeds, it pushed the lesion to a little bit safer of a location so that he was able to fully remove it, so I would never have to have this happen again for the rest of my life. So it was a miracle, and it wasn't God was ignoring me or he was silent. He had something way better in mind that I could have ever imagined or asked for.
Wow. So
Yeah.
actually those 5 moments, those moments that you thought, man, this is taking me out,
Yeah.
was actually taking this thing out of your body,
Yes.
elevating it to a place where it was operable
Yes.
to remove. I mean, that is mind blowing.
Yeah.
So when you heard that, no doubt you turned your gaze to God and were like, whoa, God, you're actually really, really good.
Yes.
But you still had a journey to walk through.
Yes.
So take us through that.
It was really hard being that young, and obviously this was not on my plan for my life to be learning how to walk at 22 years old. And my friends are, you know, graduating now from college and getting married and doing all the normal things of that age. But God gave me a strength, and continues to this day, because I still don't have use of my left hand. But it's something I can't describe. It was a strength that, and even in the stroke rehabilitation hospital, my physical therapists, they were astounded by my faith and the way God was giving me the strength that they hadn't seen before, and just a grit and determination. I mean, I had my moments. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, but I had my moments, but I just was so blessed, and I had an incredible family and support system. My parents were with me every step of the way, and just, you know, picked me up in my low moments.
Yes.
And God sustained. It was only God that got me through that, and still does.
I was just going to ask you, who was or what was the source of you being able to come out of those dark moments? Because sometimes when we get there, you know, you can have the faith in your mind, but it's not coming out in your heart. It's not coming out in your actions. But really, your parents came alongside of you and encouraged you, keep going, you've got this.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Both my parents were with me, and they were going through it too. And I
can only imagine as a parent. Yes.
When I ended up writing my book about my story, I had each one of my parents write a couple paragraphs of each chapter, because I wanted them to give their perspective, because it wasn't just me going through it.
No.
And my mom talks about in the book of getting on her face on the floor and just praying out to the Lord to save me. And you know, we all had these incredible moments with God, and that he stepped up into each and every one of our lives to help us get through this.
Wow. What would you say is one of the most beautiful attributes you learned of the Lord in this difficulty?
Oh gosh, if I had to pick one, that's hard. Definitely that he is there. He is never silent. He is always working. Even when we don't see it or feel it, he is working. And so I'm fortunate that I got to see the other side of it. Some people, we won't see what he's doing on this side of eternity. But I want people to remember, he is working. He is never silent, and he is faithful. It's just...
He's so faithful. When I look at you here, you're here. I mean, you were paralyzed, and now you're walking, you're living, you're writing, you're doing all of these beautiful things in your life. What do you see for your future?
I am so excited for the future, and I am married. My husband and I are trying to start a family.
How long have you guys been married?
6 years.
Okay.
Yes. And he's amazing and so supportive of me. And I, you know, since I still don't have use of my left hand, he helps me with all those things I can't do, and just does it with joy. And he's been a huge blessing to me. But we want to have a family. We just built a house. I work in HR. I work in human resources full time. And I'm just so excited for the future. Even though it's not what I would have imagined when I was 22 years old,
yes,
it is a huge blessing, because I have a whole new perspective on life after this. I have a whole new relationship with Jesus that is stronger than ever before. And I just want to tell the world of his goodness and that's where I am now.
Yes, it is beautiful. It's powerful to see what the Lord has brought you through. When I think about that, a 22-year-old girl suddenly, who's healthy, I mean, perfectly healthy, no signs of anything wrong in your body, is struck with something not once, but 5 times. And you are here as a living testimony of God's miraculous power. Heather, your story is amazing. In our last few moments, what is one word of encouragement you would give someone who's going through the unthinkable?
Well, the truth is we're all going to have hard times in life, unfortunately. But one thing is, you know, kind of what I already said, that God is faithful. He is working. He is with you. He will always be with you. And just to put all of your worries and your burdens at the foot of the cross, and He will sustain you.
Come on. Yes, He will. Oh, Heather, you are amazing. I love your story, and I hope people get your book. They need to read more about it and from your parents' perspective and everything else that went on through that journey. We are so thankful for your life, and we're thankful for you coming by Unscripted Faith today.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's all about God, and
It really is.
I'm just here to share what He did in my life.
That's right. All for His glory and His honor. Heather, listen, stay tuned, because there's another one who's going to join us and share about the glory of God in his life. Pastor Rob Maine is in the house, and he has something that Heather can relate to: how strong theology matters when life is anything but neat. Stay with us.
Why is it important to be plugged into a local church? Well, let me share the ways it's impacted me and my family. My parents raised me in an active church attendance. We arrived early and stayed late to build relationships with our church family. We served and discovered unique gifts and talents God had given us. Church is where I was taught the foundations of Scripture. It's where I built friendships and attended youth conferences that radically impacted my life for Christ. As an adult, I planted myself and my family in a church with a strong kids ministry. It's been the greatest joy to watch my kids grow up in the church, and now as young adults, they are serving on missions trips and as small group leaders with a youth group. They've owned their faith and will no doubt raise their kids up in the church. Friends, find yourself a church family and watch how God blesses you.
Pastor Rob Maine, along with his wife Lauren, moved to Pittsburgh in 2013 to plant Renaissance Church. Pastor Rob is the lead and founding staff elder of Renaissance Church in Pittsburgh, PA, and believes having a high view of theology and doctrine helps us answer questions so that we can know and love God fully and love others. Pastor Rob, welcome to Unscripted Faith.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Angela.
We are honored to have you today, and I have got to hear all of your story and how you came to know Jesus.
Yeah, it's I mean, the short version is I was the marching band president who got saved through the Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Come on!
Yeah, it's a long story, but the short of it is, you know, I grew up, like many people, believing that the way I perform, the way I work, what I do is going to earn somebody's love. Wow. And so whether that was parents, peers, teachers, that was then redirected on who God is. And I was awakened to the gospel when I was about 18 years old through the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, got a devotional, and in that devotional it says, God is madly in love with me, not because of my performance, not because of my work, but because of the work that Christ has done in his life, death, and resurrection for me. And so I was able to start operating, not to work for God's love, but working from his love.
Come on. And that's such a truth that people need to know.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, because even in church, like you said, you can be in church and believe in God, but still think it's performative. How I do dictates how much he loves me. Wow, so you met the Lord at 18 and you began to understand, I have value because he says so.
Yep, that's
period.
Right.
So then what happens in your life?
Yeah, what happens in my life after that, got invited to start leading in youth groups and was I was an undergrad and with emphasis on music education.
Where did you go to school?
Youngstown State University,
Okay.
Dana School of Music, classical piano major.
Come
Started
on!
teaching in the public schools, K through 5. It was a blast.
That's amazing. We
yeah.
should have had you get up on the keys for us. Play a little
Not as much practicing these days as I would like to admit. So yeah, from there, was teaching in the public schools for a while and felt a distinct call on my life that the Lord was inviting me to push all of my chips in towards vocational ministry.
Wow. So now, was that like a defining moment with the Lord, or was it just these little nuggets kind of along the way?
Yeah, I would describe it as when I feel a true call is on somebody's life, it has to be both internal and an external call.
Come on.
And what happened for me was I had the external call first. The elders in my local church in Youngstown, Ohio, were affirming me, my giftings, my skill sets, character, competency, but I didn't feel it on the inside yet. What happened was in the middle of teaching a second grade drum circle, I felt the Spirit prompting me to push all my chips in, go all in, and move towards vocational ministry.
Wow, that is remarkable.
Yeah.
Okay, so you say, yes, Lord, I'm going to follow this call. Where
Yeah.
does that call take you to?
Yeah, it took my wife and I, we'd been married for 10 days at this point.
Wait.
Yeah.
When you discerned the call, it had been...
Well, the discern the call was months leading up to it, but we knew what we were doing. We got married.
Yes.
10 days later, moved down to Louisville, Kentucky. Was at a great seminary down there, great local church that valued multiplication, church planting, overseas missions. And that's where giftings and skill sets were recognized. Hey, Rob, you might have the ability to plant a church, to start something from scratch. You have entrepreneurial leadership within you. And again, it's the same thing. Had that external call first.
Yes.
Didn't believe it, was kicking against the goads. Like,
Yes.
I don't know about this.
Yes.
And then eventually, Lauren and I took a trip to Pittsburgh for her birthday. For her 25th birthday. Man, that's a while ago now. And it was... we were sitting around this city, and we visited the city many times when we were dating.
Okay.
And we loved the city as consumers while we were dating. But when we came here, we started falling in love with the neighbors, the people of Pittsburgh. Yeah.
You loved our Yinzer.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Love the people here. Yeah.
Nobody understands the language of Pittsburgh unless you have been here.
No, we get it. We get the jimmies, gum bands, buggies, got it all.
Yes, all of these words that everyone's like, what are you talking
Absolutely.
about? I love that you fell in love with that about us here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And then you said, okay, let's plant a church. Like you said, the external call as well as the internal.
Yeah.
So you said, let's plant a church. We're planning in 2013 here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, we moved here 2013. We wanted to establish ourselves as missionaries here. One of my key lifelong verses is Ephesians 4:11, where God has given certain giftings to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. So I didn't want to come up here and create a Sunday experience or something they can check off the religious checklist to say, I've performed, I've done enough, look at me, God. What we wanted to do was move here and develop missionaries, equip missionaries here. So for a year and a half, we developed a core team before we ever launched public services.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you...
Launched public services fall of 2014. We have since planted another church since we've been here.
Wow.
And we are now going all in again with discerning, all right, where are we going to plant another church here in the city?
Wow, that is remarkable.
Yeah.
And now along the journey, not only has the church grown, but your family has.
Yeah.
Yeah, so tell us about your family.
Yeah, we moved here with no house and no kids.
Yeah.
And now we have moved into our second house, now with 4 kids.
It's amazing.
So, yeah,
and
Lucy is 12, Nora's 10, Miles is 8, and Jack will turn 6 at the end of this month.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. I love to see a family grow, like both in ministry, but also in home, where ministry happens the most, the nearest and dearest, the most developing.
Yeah.
Let me ask you talk about high theology, that's really important. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, what I mean by that is doctrine is always going to inform our devotion, meaning that everything that we practice is theological, and everything that's theological is practical. What we do, what we think, what we feel always flows from what we believe, and that's either a proper theology or an improper theology. I mean, most of my sins of the flesh come from faulty beliefs about who God is, who I am, and what the gospel is. And so I believe that when you have deep doctrine, it's going to deepen your devotion.
Wow. Okay, so speak on more to that. Give us an example of what you mean by maybe a doctrine or a belief that we would conceive within our flesh that would produce flesh.
Yeah, so think about the concept of forgiveness.
Yeah.
It's not easy to forgive others, but that's at the heart of the gospel. If my forgiveness from God is based on my performance, how well I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, how well I cleaned myself up, that's a faulty view of the gospel. And so often we put that on others. Like if you were to sin against me, I would have to start saying, well, you need to do X, Y, and Z before I forgive you. Wow. That's a false gospel.
Come on.
Right?
Come on.
The real gospel
on.
says God forgives us solely because we are in Christ. And if he can forgive me, and I'm the chief of sinners, how can I withhold forgiveness from somebody else?
Come on. I mean, I think that is, like you said, it is the center of the gospel. It is the message of the cross. It is what Christ and God has demonstrated from the beginning of time all throughout history. And yet we can get so lost in our carnality, in our sense of we want justice right here. You need to pay for what you've done, and I'm going to withhold that until you've proven you've earned it. But he didn't do that with us.
No, and a lot of people think that forgiveness and justice are opposed, but without forgiveness, you can't have true justice. It's just impossible. And what you see the Apostle Paul doing, Peter doing, is when you look at their letters, it's doctrine the first half, devotion the second half. Deep convictions about the gospel, and then deep practice of the gospel. You see that in all his letters.
Yes, and it is the difference maker. It's what makes us the living epistles read of men.
Yep, that's right.
That is so powerful. So now does your mindset of like missions, obviously you have a high view of theology, that all informs, that missions piece, what does that look like in practicality within your church life and community?
Yeah, so a lot of the ways that we have determine our methodology of how we operate as a church is we gather together, we equip together, and we scatter together. And when we scatter together, that includes things like our community groups. It includes things like being on mission with church planting within the city, and also mission overseas. And so when we think about mission, we don't just want it to be this piece of the pie. We want it to be a lifestyle for our folks. So everywhere we are is where we are on mission. And we tell folks, we want you to be who you are in Christ, wherever you are in Christ.
Wow, that's beautiful. And I think that just having that kind of framework helps believers to understand their role. Because I think a lot of times what happens within church culture, right? It's like, oh, well, he's the pastor. They're the ones doing ministry. But it's like, everywhere you are, people can meet Christ. You're a reflection of his glory. Like,
that's
so
exactly right.
I love that you have given your people a framework to live and exist from.
If you have a faulty view of the gospel, you have a faulty view of evangelism.
Yes.
Right? If we believe it's up to our works to save ourselves, then it's going to be up to our words to save somebody else.
Come on.
But that's not the gospel. We're just responsible to share, love, be faithful. It's on the Lord to save, regardless of where you stand on predestination or other views. What you'll find with folks is they're always on their knees asking the Lord to save. That's his job. Our job is to share.
That's it. They're drawn by his spirit.
That's right.
Paul plants, Apollo waters, God gives the increase. Let's go. Come on.
Yeah, that's right.
I love that. And when you have that mindset, which really comes from your own personal journey with the Lord, when you have that mindset, it takes the pressure off.
It really does.
And when we live under the pressure, how would you say what our life looks like, how different it looks when we live with the pressure?
When we live with the pressure, we have a more anxious presence around people because we believe that we have to perform. Like, I have to perform to impress you or your viewers. A less anxious presence says, God is already pleased with me. And he's going to use me as he sees fit. I might be the one who plants. I might be the one who waters, but it's only going to be the Lord who gives the growth.
Come on, that is so good. I love that. And when we live from that perspective, which is what Christ taught, which is what we read in scriptures, that's where we're free indeed. Like
free.
in every way,
Yeah.
like completely and utterly free to the uttermost,
That's
to
right.
experience the fullness of his peace, the fullness of his joy.
Amen.
It's so powerful. Pastor Rob, I love that God has planted you here in Pittsburgh and all that you guys are doing. So Renaissance Church, what are kind of some of the themes or the things that you're doing currently that bleed into what is yet to come?
Yeah, what we're focusing on right now is discipling our folks.
Yeah.
We think that is a needed practice within our church, is discipling them. One of the main things we're discipling them in right now is the practice of fasting. We invited our church into a season of fasting during the Lenten calendar. And, you know, a lot of people, when they're thinking about fasting, they think, I have to fast in order to get God to respond.
Wow,
And
come on.
that is not how fasting works in the Bible. Fasting is our response to what we see going on in the world, and then prayer then asks God to respond. And so we're in the season of fasting right now. It's been beautiful. One of the things we've been asking them to fast and pray about is to deepen our awareness of God's holiness, but simultaneously to deepen our awareness of our sinfulness. Because we know that when we are aware of our sin and aware of how holy God is, the cross becomes bigger and more beautiful. The gospel becomes real in our lives.
Wow,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And it really does. One bleeds into the other. When you
Bingo.
recognize
Yep.
it is, the need becomes so clear.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. So do you feel that this fasting season for your church, have you seen your folks grow in it, stretched in it?
Yeah.
What?
I mean, they're stretched, they're growing in it. One of the fruits that we're seeing is an immense amount of vulnerability within our community groups and discipling relationships where sin is being confessed regularly. And it's
Come
amazing.
on.
Yeah.
Wow. And then
Yeah.
what is your community group once the sin's confessed? Is there like anything that they do, or how do they walk that out together?
I mean, that is what it means to walk in the light.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people think walking in the light is perfection, but walking in the light, according to 1 John 1, is confession.
Yes.
It's repentance. And so we celebrate it. There's forgiveness, there's grace, which then empowers them to want to obey God. Not because they have to, but because they're already loved. They're not obeying to be loved, they're obeying from love.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're recognizing his holiness
That's
and
right.
their sinfulness.
That's right.
Their need for him and how
Yeah.
how beautiful life is lived within him, and how it
Yeah.
separates us really from a life that is apart from him.
Yeah.
The more we fall in love. Pastor Rob, I love what you are doing through Renaissance Church.
Oh, thank you.
I love the testimony of your life. And next time you've got to bring Lauren.
Oh, we have
Come
to.
on.
Yeah,
And the
she's-
kids.
All the kids.
All the
of them.
kids.
Get all 6 of us on this couch. We will figure out how to fit.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Pastor Rob, thank you so much for all of your yeses to the Lord. And thank you for what you're doing for this city and truly how you're impacting the kingdom.
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you. Ooh, guys, I love that. Focusing on God's holiness, recognizing our sinfulness, even as Heather shared, recognizing that God is always with you. He is the miracle working Father. Nothing is impossible for those who believe. He can do all things for you today. So whatever you need, look to him, see his faithfulness, and trust he will see you through every storm.
Cornerstone Television wishes to thank all our faithful viewers whose consistent prayers and financial support have made this program possible.